Hello there, I'm Lina Ahmadou. Welcome to Africa 54. Here is what's coming up. Kenyan activists are re-evaluating their anti-government protests after recent demonstrations were marked by violence and looting. U.S. President Joe Biden criticizes a Supreme Court decision granting presidents immunity from prosecution for official actions. And a Ugandan school showcases young innovators at the 2024 VEX Robotics Championship, highlighting the achievements of girls in STEM education. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. Three people are dead in Northwest Africa after being arrested during riots in southern Mauritania, according to the government. The election of incumbent President Mohamed Ould Cheikh El Ghazouani is raising tensions across the nation. The Interior Ministry says looting and vandalism erupted in the town of Kaidi in the Senegal River Valley Monday night, with security forces arresting a number of rioters. The ministry says 2 arrested rioters died in custody and the third died later in hospital. The ministry did not provide further details on the circumstances of the death, but said there were limited options to detain rioters due to the late hour and the large number of demonstrators. A transparent and thorough investigation is underway to establish the causes of the death, according to the Interior Ministry. Opposition figure Biram Da Abid is calling on President Ghazouani to engage in what he calls sincere dialogue following the demonstrations.
Je présente mes condoléances à tous les Mauritaniens, à tous les musulmans.
I offer my condolences to all Mauritanians, to all Muslims, to all fighters of the free world throughout the world, because today they have declared several young people from the town of Kadi dead, and hundreds of members of the IRA, hundreds of members of other parties in the Biram 2024 coalition have been arrested all over the country. We reaffirm before the authorities that we refuse and continue to refuse the results of this election masquerade. If their only response is to get people killed, then they can just carry on. But in any case, this denotes their total failure. It denotes their unpopularity.
Mauritania has largely withstood the tide of jihadism. The streets across Kenya are eerily quiet on Wednesday as activists behind the anti-government protests are rethinking their strategy after demonstrations on Tuesday were marred by widespread violence and looting. Activists say the violence was the work of, quote, goons hired by politicians to either discredit legitimate demonstrators or advance their own agendas. But they acknowledge that it risks undermining the protest movement. Interior Minister Kithure Kindike blames the violence on, quote, hordes of marauding criminal gangs and says that there was an attempt to politicize crime. The initial protests last month against proposed tax hikes were overwhelmingly peaceful, although the police fired tear gas and water cannon at demonstrators. For more insight on the protest in Kenya, I am joined by Macharia Munene, a professor of history and international relations at U.S. University in Nairobi. Welcome to the show, Professor Munene. What are your thoughts on how the protest has descended into looting, and the activists claim that it was orchestrated by, quote, goons hired by politicians?
It is very sad what is happening. Yes, the whole thing has deteriorated from its original objective. The original demonstrations were very peaceful. They were very effective. And you could see who was running the show and very focused. What is going on now is essentially a counter move, what appears to be a response to the success. It appears the objective is to discredit the demonstrators, the cyber demonstrators, these young people, the Gen Zs, who are very focused by introducing people who throw stones, and they are criminals. They are, as the minister said, these are criminals, but they are not in any way connected to the original organizers. These are counter moves.
So how can activists ensure that their movement is not hijacked by violent gangs and derailed?
It's very difficult for them to counter these kind of moves because the violence we see on this side is organized to discredit the first group, which has really jolted a lot of people. These people, they can do now is withdraw, suspend their activism, and let the goons be dealt with by the police, the way the police like to deal with them, if that is what's going on. But the original players are not responsible for what is going on. So these are different matter altogether. And the original organizers are frustrated, they are horrified, they are sad about it because it is counterproductive to the objective, and they are not happy about it.
And quickly before we wrap, what is your observations of activist efforts to push President Ruto to resign?
Well, they are divided, as from what I can tell. There are those having succeeded in stopping the finance bill, or getting the president to say he will stop the finance bill. There you have then one group that says you should go an extra mile and maybe change the government. And that's why now they are not quite agreed and even on how to do it, because there is still that process of the constitutional process. It has to be voted out if you are going to vote it out. That's the only acceptable way. Okay. And at present, there is no IBC, so it is a difficult situation. But there appears to be debate within the movement as to how to go about it.
Thank you, Mr. Munene. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Macharia Munene is a professor of history and international relations at the U.S. University in Nairobi. Now, U.S. President Joe Biden is speaking out against Monday's Supreme Court decision that gives presidents immunity from prosecution for any actions that fall within their official job duties. The High Court's ruling doesn't dismiss former President Donald Trump's 2020 election interference case, but as VOA's Dora McQuarrie reports, it does delay it.
Good evening.
President Joe Biden slammed the Supreme Court ruling that former presidents cannot be prosecuted for any actions that fall within their official job duties. A decision related to former President Donald Trump's alleged involvement in the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol.
The American people must decide whether Donald Trump's assault on our democracy on January 6 makes him unfit for public office in the highest office in the land. The American people must decide if Trump's embrace of violence to preserve his power is acceptable.
The former president reacted to the Supreme Court decision on his website by sharing a social media post, which appeared to be from his Truth Social platform. That said, the Supreme Court totally dismantled most of the charges against me. Joe Biden should now call off his dogs. Our country should now be focused on greatness again. The High Court did not dismiss the current election interference case against Trump. He's accused of trying to overturn the 2020 U.S. presidential election won by Biden. Chicago-Kent law professor Harold Krent says Trump's actions leading up to January 6 straddle both official and unofficial acts for which Trump could be prosecuted.
To the extent that he was acting as a private candidate, then his acts would fall into the bucket of unofficial acts. But to the extent that he was talking to the vice president about what he thought the vice president should do in the Senate, to the extent that he was talking to the Justice Department about whether or not there was fraud in the voting, then he was acting in his official capacity.
The events of January 6th were mentioned only briefly during Thursday's presidential debate, but the insurrection could be a major campaign issue if the Biden campaign presses the...
Women are on top of that swayable portion of the electorate. The young voters are also swayable. Now, they're not dependable voters.
So the election interference case against Trump likely goes forward, with a lower court making key decisions about appropriate charges in light of the Supreme Court ruling. Experts say a trial is unlikely before Election Day.
This absolutely delays legal proceedings. If that was a goal of President Trump's camp, then it was accomplished.
That leaves it up to the Biden campaign to decide whether to make January 6th a central campaign issue. Dora McQuarrie, VOA News, Washington.
Britain is set to hold a general election on Thursday, July 4th, with polls suggesting the country is likely to elect a new leader. How might that change Britain's stance on key issues like Russia's war on Ukraine? Henry Ridgwell reports from London.
Dartford, east of London, is a bellwether constituency. Its voters have picked a candidate from the winning party of every general election since 1964, so it's a useful gauge of national feeling. There is dissatisfaction after 14 years of Conservative rule, but little enthusiasm for alternatives.
The people of England don't actually get to decide on what is going to happen in the country.
Right across the board, I don't trust any of them anymore, especially when our Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, lied.
Boris Johnson, who resigned following a series of scandals, including the breaking of COVID-19 lockdown rules, is one of 5 different Conservative Prime Ministers over the past 8 turbulent years. Analysts say current Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is struggling to shake off that legacy.
The question there is the cost of living, but I also think it's a sense of scandal and sleaze.
The opposition Labour Party under Keir Starmer is some 20 percentage points ahead in most polls, but Starmer would inherit a weak economy.
So one of the first big questions to face a Starmer government is going to be, how are you going to raise the money to fix our crumbling public services?
Amid Russia's war on Ukraine, conflict in the Middle East and global political uncertainty, would Starmer lead Britain in a new direction?
Over the 2 big crises of our time, Gaza and Ukraine, there's very little, if any, difference between the positions adopted by the big parties, so I don't think there will be much of a change.
Britain's smaller parties could play a big role in deciding the outcome. The centre-left Liberal Democrats have a chance of pushing the Conservatives into 3rd place. The anti-immigration, pro-Brexit Reform Party could also peel off right-leaning Conservative voters. Reform leader Nigel Farage has been widely criticised by other parties after saying the West provoked Russia into invading Ukraine. Henry Ridgwell, VOA News, London.
We are excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, we'll tell you about a Ugandan team competing in the 2024 VEX Robotics Championship in Dallas, Texas. We'll be right back.
On the next Straight Talk Africa, as Kenya's youth threaten to continue protesting, what is next for President William Ruto? Will he stand by his pledge to not pass the bill to increase taxes? And will he meet with the youth who are calling for him to step down? Join me, Vincent Makori, on the next edition of Straight Talk Africa as we take a closer look at the Kenyan president and how he navigates the political landscape of one of East Africa's most democratically stable countries and economically developed nations that appears to be crumbling.
As journalists continue to report on complex and difficult topics, including conflict, natural disasters, and human suffering, studies like the one done by the Harvard Kennedy School indicate it's increasingly exposing them to trauma and affecting their mental health. On this week's edition of Our Voices, we will explore how mental health is discussed in the media and why female journalists are at a higher risk. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
In other news, in the U.S. state of Colorado, a man has been sentenced to 60 years in prison for killing 5 members of an extended Senegalese family in a house fire. Authorities say 20-year-old Kevin Bowie plotted the fire out of revenge for a robbery after he mistakenly tracked his stolen iPhone to the house. But no one in the home had anything to do with the robbery. The UN Refugee Agency is expanding its humanitarian appeal for Sudan as increasing numbers of people flee the country's war and widespread hunger in search of safety in neighboring countries. The UNHCR says to protect Sudanese refugees, it's revising its appeal to $1.5 billion, up from the $1.4 billion it requested in January. And Kenyan police are now patrolling the streets of Haiti's capital, Port-au-Prince, in an effort to curb gang violence. The UN says gang violence in Haiti has displaced more than 300,000 children since March. The spike in violence led Prime Minister Ariel Henry to resign. After traveling around the world for a year, Asami Okano, a Japanese teacher, settled in Uganda to start a cocoa and vanilla farming business. This is where she met her husband, Yoshito Asai, in 2013. They got married and had 2 children, both born in Uganda. VOA's Halima Atumani and Mukasa Francis met the couple and have this story from Kayunga district in central Uganda.
Asami Okano is a hands-on boss at the Farm of Africa, a business she started with her husband, Yoshito Asai, in the Kayunga district of central Uganda. The former teacher traveled the world for a year before finding her new home in 2012. In Uganda, land belongs either to the government, the community, or individuals. Most of this land is still in bushy areas, but slowly being sold off to private owners like Yoshito and Asami. As a result, very little land is left for farmers to grow food for consumption.
Uganda has good environment, many trees and many greenery, but every year they destroy the forest and they open the land, but we can understand they need to grow and to eat. So that's why cocoa and vanilla as agroforestry also it's good for environment. They can get money and also they get matoke.
Asami says as a student she was interested to learn about developing countries, especially Asia and Africa. So during her year-long tour, which took her to different countries, she arrived in Uganda and landed a job as a volunteer at an orphanage. She worked there for a year before the orphanage closed for lack of funding. Still in Uganda, Asami researched other ways to earn a living and discovered farming as a viable option. She decided to follow that path and settle down in Uganda. Yoshito moved to Uganda as a backpacker, doing his own research in agriculture while also looking for a job there. Along the way, Yoshito met Asami, started working for her before both decided to get married and settle down in Uganda. Yoshito says what he especially loves about the country is its people and weather.
Through the year, the 25-20 degrees, so you can live with half shirts. You don't have to wear a big jacket or you don't have to become naked, so it's perfect weather. Then also, like people are friendly. If I need some help, I ask someone who is passing the road, then always people can help. So I love living here.
But life in Uganda comes with its own challenges. It took the couple 2 years and visits to 80 different sites to find their dream farm. Moreover, Asami says they had to adjust to cultural differences, particularly very different attitude towards punctuality and time management. They also had to learn the local language, Luganda, to be able to communicate with their Ugandan employees.
Yeah, like this. Yeah, not fluent, but yeah, I can negotiate with the border also by Uganda.
At their 50-acre piece of land, the Japanese couple mainly grow cocoa, vanilla, and a few banana plants to feed their 50 farm workers, who are mostly from the neighboring community in Kayunga. Abasarita is one of them and works as a processing manager at the Farm of Africa.
Sometimes when they are coming, they bring for them some stuff like maybe clothes, toys for kids, and some other eats. And also at our farm, we have matoke. They planted matoke and they sell it at a reduced price. So it's easier for them to come and work, and they take matoke. They are the best people I've ever seen, I think, because we do interact very well. We do cooperate very well as long as you do their work in time and all that they tell you to do.
Life is busy and hectic for the farming couple, as Asami travels frequently for business-related trips, while they both work hard to expand their business, exporting products to Japan and the United States. As a result, visits to their home country are rare and difficult. But Asami and Yoshito make sure to keep in touch with their relatives and friends back home through weekly phone calls. They say that even after 11 years in Uganda, they feel they are just getting started and still getting adjusted to their new life. Halima Athmani for VA News, Kayunga, Uganda.
The African School of Innovation, Science and Technology in Kampala, Uganda, is nurturing young scientists and innovators through STEM and robotics education. The school's students, mainly girls, showcased their skills at the 2024 VEX Robotics Championship in Dallas, Texas. To learn more about this team, VOA's Paul Ndiho spoke to Arinatwe Rugiendo, the founder of Technology School.
I've always been innovative ever since I was a very young person. I have a history of disruption, not wanting to follow the norm, and that tells my story, which started in the media at the age of 23 when we started the Red Pepper newspaper, the very first tabloid in the whole of this region.
Very successful.
It was it was out of the ordinary because we didn't want to look like what is existing. How do we turn around our resources that are being taken out of our continent in a raw form? You need competences. You need to begin a revolution that creates that critical mass of future scientists, of future critical thinkers, of future innovators, of future problem solvers. And we must start with the children. So that in 20, 30 years' time, you have a different people who think in a different format. And that's what we have done since 2016 when we started.
Very good.
It's not an alternative curriculum, but it's a curriculum that uses a Lego and robotics type of education to be able to enhance the current curriculum in the primary and secondary schools.
Your team recently had an opportunity to participate in one of the biggest robotic competitions in Dallas. Tell us more.
The STEM education movement around the world has been known for a very long time. Countries like the US, really, China, Israel, Singapore, partook this very many years back. And that's why they are superior, even in space. They can go up to Mars. Africa cannot even go beyond, I don't know where, beyond the main road. So we now, when we started to champion STEM education, so we got into a STEM education global community, got connected to that. And then we found that all along there has always been a world championship where all countries gather in the United States to compete in terms of their competences around creating problem-solving technology projects, particularly which are robotics based. In other words, we are now living in a roboticized world where everything is being solved through robotic solutions. We've been there twice now, but Africa, fields are like 5 countries, each with one team. Those are 5 teams. And the teams that are on the ground every year are about 2,200. The United States alone fields like 800. Then you have China, fields like 200, and many, many, many others. And they're doing things, amazing things that you cannot understand. So we participate in these competitions. One, to expose our children to see what is the rest of the world doing that we as Africans are not doing. What are the technologies that are informing the latest trends, the things they are building, sending drones, building drones that go up to they just go there exhibiting, you see things that are able to move up to the moon, to see what we are doing. Africa, nowhere. No support from governments, nothing. All this is our individual effort. And so, but that's the reason we go there. Expose our children to see what the other countries are doing, to be able to bring these things on the continent, to believe that we can also do it as Africans. Our team, out of the 2,200 that participated, was awarded a special badge. It's called Girl-Powered Google Badge for fielding most girls on the team. In other words, girls were more than the boys on our team. And that caught their eye because we're trying to promote more girls in STEM disciplines.
What are you teaching these kids? Are you teaching them robotics? Are you teaching them computers? Are you teaching them language, like the different languages that we use in that space?
We use gadgets, like, for example, Legos that they use to build the reality that they find theoretically in classes, their normal curriculum. And then as they advance down, they move into robotics and they start coding and they start creating robotic solutions, coded solutions to different problems that they encounter in their communities.
That's amazing. Well, that was Arenaitwe Rugiendo, founder of the African School of Innovation, Science and Technology in Kampala, Uganda, speaking to VOA technology correspondent Paul Ndiho. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.